Whoever does that are low life.
Hello, this is Dave Travels Through Time Channel 2, and I'm reading more of this book here, The State of Change, Sixth Doctor novel. How's everybody? If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. So I'm starting a few minutes here. I'm on page 62. Or 63, I believe. I think 66. Okay. All right. Can I do it with the camera on or off when I'm reading?
Whatever you want to do.
I guess it doesn't matter, does it? Get the theme song ready. I like this book pretty good so far. All right. So we're gonna do the ice cream thing on Monday, right? The Angry Unicorn.
Yes.
Yeah. So we decided to do it on Monday.
We would do it today, but I'm too sore.
Yep. So we get the theme song started. So we'll go to Dalek. I'm gonna credit as doing the theme song for doing this. Here we go. Doctor Who, State of Change by Christopher Bullis. Read by Dave Travels Through Time. Page 66. But dangerous, your own aides can hardly keep pace with the constant stream of technological changes and the social and ethical problems arising from them. Ability must not outstrip wisdom. What else might these do to these people? I shudder to think. Well, at least they seem to have power going spare down there. Maybe we can tap into some to recharge the TARDIS. Yes, that must be our next step. Then, well, we shall see. First, of course, we must get down to the ground. Say, do you think there were any bugs in the tomb? Perry asked. She asked, rolling up the sleeve of her shirt. I seemed to be. She gave a little choking gasp of fear. First, fine dark feathers were growing out of her forearm. She looked at the doctor in mute horror. He was at her side in an instant, clasping her hand with firm reassurance. It's all right, Perry. Let's get back to the TARDIS. Don't worry. Convulsively, Perry tore open the top of her shirt with her free hand. She was trembling with shock. Varos! It's Varos again. With an effort, the doctor got to her feet, and half carrying her, he helped her stagger back towards the hole in the pyramid wall. Then as they reached it, Perry just distantly seemed to hear him mumble. Sorry, but I don't think I feel quite... And his legs buckled, and he collapsed forward and lay motionless at her feet. For a terrible moment, she stared him Uncomprehensibly, her mind reeling under the double shock. Then she knelt down, feebly tugging at the arm of her coat. Please, doctor, not now. I need you to help me. There was no response. He heaved and managed to roam onto his back. The face staring up at her was that of a younger man with thin, sensitive features and paler, straight, flaxen hair. It was the face the doctor had worn when she had first met him. Captain Septimus Fabio paused, grasping the handrails firmly down the long walkway. He licked his dry lips, realizing his knuckles showed white when he held the railing. He was scared that she knew what he had done. He was scared of what Rome would do if they ever learned of his failure. But above all, he was scared by the monstrous artifact in which he was traveling. She had been quite wrong in suggesting he might be afraid of flight. He had no fear of heights, and there was no great sensation of speed once the airship was clear of the ground. Steadily, he continued down the long, gently humped curve of the gangway, his boots falling softly on his narrow strip of boarding. Wooden boards, almost the only natural material on the ship. Everything else was fabric and metal. But the vast spread of fabric used to cover the ship and contain lifting gas was hardly natural. It had been woven on powered looms and then treated to make a gaslight. From this had been machined the tens of thousands of identical struts and plates, assembling into thousands of rectangular frame elements, each in turn subdivided by bracing wires in identical, repetitious, triangular patterns. Endless mechanical repetition, endless sameness. Nothing had ever been quite like that before, he thought. It was wrong, it was alien, and it had been given his chance to destroy both it and her, and now he was throwing the chance away. But he had no choice. He was not the suicidal type. Fabio slowed his pace. He was now crossing over the gray bulk of the forced gas cell from the tail of the horse. It was only a couple of cubits below his feet, straining upward against the mesh of its securing net. As he stretched the central rib frame of the five that encircled the great gas bag, he looked back the way he'd come, then quickly knelt down, reached under the planking of the walkway. He was standing again in a moment, clasping a small object in his hand, pounding with relief. His heart pounding with relief. It had still been there, untouched. It was a flat box of light wood, perforated with a regular pattern of drilled holes, trailing the short length of thin cord from an eyelet set into one light. Inside, copper-powered cogs turned slowly under a dial pointer. Carefully, it locked back the striker arm and closed the lid again. If you find a chance to use it, your reward will be great, he had been told. Well, they would never need to know of his failure, and his reward would be to continue to live. For the first time since they had departed, he breathed freely. He was safe. Even if she came upon this very moment, he would claim he had found the incendiary during the execution of his loyal duties as a loyal special security officer. Briefly, he toyed with the idea of taking it to her to show how he had foiled an intent on her life. Surely that would negate any suspicions she might have of him. All he had to do was bluff it out to her face. He thought of those clear, penetrating eyes boring out to him. Now, best be rid of the thing immediately. Feeling more confident now, explanation of the right to be challenged, he walked back to the head of the vertical ladder that ran down between the gas cells, 4 and 5 to the heels of the ship. At the bottom, he climbed a short flight of steps that curved up the inside of the belly of the craft until he reached the lateral gateway that ran almost the entire length of the giant airship. The engine noise got louder. 2 crewmen were checking the gumball mountings that supported one of the rear pairs of motor nacelles. Seaman's need to understand, but why do those monstrosities have to be fed with the burning oil found in the sands of Babylonia? The crewmen pressed against the hull to let him pass, bowing their heads. He ignored them. He had no time for native Egyptians. Amongst themselves, such were held in high esteem, something to do with moving near to the gods, he understood. She encouraged the belief, apparently. They actually seemed capable of operating the machinery of the ship was further proof in Fabio's eyes that there was something improper in its nature. He clutched the incendiary tightly to him. Why had fate trapped him like this? Why would they all not have burned? Another minute, he had reached the tail section and was climbing down the ladder into the fin itself. The tiny cabin was empty as he had hoped. Fabio opened one of the sliding window panels, which allowed instructions to be given to the grounds crew during mooring operations. Air blasted in, reminding them again of the actual speed. The airship seemed to hang motionless in the blue void. Alexandria to Rome one day. It was magnificent, it was frightening, and it was changed too fast. She eagerly embraced all things new, it seemed, but she realized how many she had offended by doing so. Somebody would stop her eventually, but not him to this day, it appeared. Then he heard his step on the ladder, the step of a big man who had no need to talk to quietly anymore. For the last time, his face returned, and with it, the knowledge that what had thrown Zanzi's to the crocodiles. Reflex drew his hand to seek his pistol, but his belt was empty. Of course, all firearms and swords were stowed in lockers during flight for fear of an accidental shot or spark igniting the flammable lifting gas. And then he knew that he was going to die, and that she had known everything all along. It was like this on Androzani, thought Perry dizzily, as seeing the doctor tumble through the door of the TARDIS. The doctor collapsed to the floor beside the console, mumbling and groaning as though in a delirium. She sank to her knees beside him, gasping for breath. It had been a desperate attempt on her part to help the doctor in his confused state back to the TARDIS, half carrying him much of the way. But somehow she had made it. In between gasps, she managed a shaky smile purely for her own benefit. Sure, puts your own priorities in order, she told herself. We're the person you come to rely on most in this world. Make that the universe in trouble. You tend to downgrade trivial personal problems like gingerly she pulled up one shirt sleeve and tried to view the patch of feathers on her form just passionately. Supposedly they look okay on a bird, she acknowledged, but to me they're growing again. Visions of the recitement chamber on Vera surged into her mind. Remember of how the transmogrify radiation felt as it poured onto her, distorting the very cells of her body so that they could be metamorphosized at the bidding of her uncontrolled subconscious mind. The doctor groaned loudly, cutting through her daft thoughts. She turned to him, wondering if she could make him comfortable again where he lay. And she saw his features flow like melted wax, and for a moment his face seemed to nibble and blur. A halo of straight blonde hair twisted, curled, and became a tint darker. The multicolored coat, which had hung loosely around the slender frame of the younger doctor, suddenly seemed to fill out. Then it was the same doctor lying on the floor who had left the TARDIS with her when they had first stepped out into the tomb. His eyes flickered open, and he stared at her frowningly. Why am I lying on the floor of the control room? He inquired tersely. Don't you remember, Doctor? We were out in the temple before, and you changed. Hands flew to his face, probing his features. Not again. I mean, you changed back to the way you looked when I first met you. You got terribly confused, and I had to help you down from the roof. But just now you changed back. No, I guess I mean forward again. Know what you were before. That is to say, oh hell, what I mean is, Doctor, then you're back to normal again. At least normal is like as you'll ever can be. Believe I resent that last comment. Recollection suddenly dawned, and he turned a concerned face to her. Perry, your arms, your feathers. Still there, I'm afraid. But I don't think they've spread further, have they? Why, Doctor? Why has it happened to me again? Is there anything you can do with where we are and what happened to you? I'm frightened. The doctor got up to his feet and helped her up in turn. He held her firmly by the shoulders with comforting strength and regarded her with a bright, keen eye. Whatever has happened, we will sort it out. But there's nothing to be gained by giving into panic. I know that, but you got to allow me a little leeway here, Doctor. I mean, I'm not used to my body changing all of a sudden like you are. Takes some getting used to. For that matter, I'm not used to that sort of change you describe happening to me either. Retro regeneration, that's not something that's supposed to occur naturally. Indeed, only Time Lords of the first rank have ever tried to initiate that process deliberately. So what rank are you, Doctor? I can see your sense of irreverence has not been affected by your experience, or the pity. Pulled up the Sheridan chair next to the tea-chest, and they sat down. What has happened to us? Is Curry linked in some way to the energy influx tube, which altered our course? The breaking of the link with the Eye of Harmony and the trace energy field I can still detect. But why should even that make our bodies go haywire? Because there are particular types of hyperspatial stress or frequencies of radiation, which, if applied in the right circumstances, can destabilize the physical form of objects. As you learned on Varus, indeed, Time Lord's physiognomy can take advantage of this potential instability at certain times. Now, traveling in this dematerialized state, so this TARDIS does, can make you even more vulnerable to such events. Which is why one of these functions is to project what you call a morphic field, to protect not only its own pattern, but also those of its passengers. Unfortunately, during the power outs, we must have been exposed to such destabilizing conditions. And now, without power to boost the TARDIS shields and stabilize the fields and isolate in some way the normal space, we remain in an unstable state. But why have we changed the way we have? Our bodies are seeking a new point of stability, or at least a point of least instability, for a time where that is his former incarnation. Why not into a totally new body? Because there's been no actual trauma to trigger normal progressive regeneration. And B, subconsciously, you will still hold the memory of the Vera's transformation within you. That alone may have been sufficient in those conditions. Remember, we have arrived on Vera's short of power. By association, that may have influenced the matter of your change. Also, the natural, unconscious desire to escape from the confines of this tomb. Yeah, but to be free here is a burdensome joke, but some things do seem to be steadied up now inside again. I'm not getting worse, and you're snapped right back. Only temporary, I'm afraid. If we went straight outside again into the process, that would resume, probably more rapidly. And when the power in here finally dies, the stabilizing effect will be gone too. How long have we got? At this low level, a few hours, no more. So the first thing we've got to do is to get some power, right? Well, that would improve our situation considerably. Well, you know Rome has electronic power. Can't you tap into some of that? Possibly, but I think we need a considerable amount to change the system sufficiently to initiate mass conversion. And of course, it would take time to arrange that, and such a power drain would bound to be noticed. Perry gestured to the dark and gloomy control room dotted with the glow globs she had stuck to the walls. But what can we do now? She frowned at the doctor, wondering if she was still not thinking a little slowly over his recent transformation. Come on, doctor, there must be a way of getting power from somewhere. Doctor scratched his head, then suddenly exclaimed, Of course, the transductor cells! Where are they? You'll see. That was Dr. Freeze, Perry thought, 1 minute up the next. It didn't help, of course, that the TARDIS was like an infinite, capacious attic room, packed with treasures and curios gathered over hundreds of years, which had been stored away and forgotten about. The doctor returned, carrying an armful of black, shaped object vaguely reminiscent of World War II mines. Transductor cells, they could be adjusted to absorb energy over a wide spectra and transmitted back to the TARDIS via a hyperspatial loop. I'm going to set some of these to act as solar absorbers, like solar power cells. Precisely. Then we only need to place them on the roof of the temple, and we can start draining power. Not much, of course, but it should maintain the status quo. Hold on, Dr. Perry was frowning. Those gizmos sound okay, but if you have to go outside to set them, you'll just continue changing. I'm not going to drag you back here again. That problem had occurred to me. I'm going to make portable morphic resonator units for us to carry that will link us to the TARDIS and should maintain our present patterns. Well, that's great. How long will that take to make? A couple hours. Can you guarantee we still got a couple hours of power left? What happens if you go retro again? As a gathering result, perhaps it'll be sent for you to tell me what to do. If those things step outside while I go right with the buildings, those resonator units. Are you sure you want to go? No, but I don't see we have any choice. The change seems to affect me gradually, but you become pretty well helpless. We can't risk that again, but I guess I can live with a few more feathers. Your reasoning is impeccable. Doctor Wade, one of the transductor cells in the console, and opened the lid in its middle, revealing 3 small colored dials, which he gestured carefully. Place them along the pyramid wall where they'll catch the most sun. When they are in position, twist the center section clockwise through 90 degrees like that. A spray of ribs extended from across the rib edge of the disc like an unfurling flower. I see. Okay, let's get on with that. You should be able to carry 4 cells. Remember not to spend any more time setting them than you must. Doctor, I assure you I won't be hanging around till my other view. I'll be 10 minutes tops. You can time me. Perry was back inside the TARDIS in under 9 minutes. The doctor noticed there was thicker, feathery grows around her ankles and extending upper calves, and her toenails had stated to extend the curve to form towns. Guess I'll just have to find some open sandals for the time being. Is the power coming in okay? The console looks brighter. It is. Thanks for your efforts. We can maintain the present minimal functions indefinitely, the doctor confirmed. We're still a long way from building the reserve we need. Oh, a very long way, but it's a start. How many more of these cells are there? 6, I thought. I put out 4 more on the roof when I finished the resonator and sold the other 2 for some more concentrated energy source, if I could find one. Hey, you're making up 2 of those things. Remember, we're both looking outside. Unfortunately, I can only find enough components on 1 unit. I seem to have left the spare part stock run a little low. I mean, I've got to stay cooped up in here alone. I'm afraid so. In any case, I don't think local costume would suit you now. You'd have to be conspicuously overdressed just to conceal your or abnormalities. Well, thank you for putting up so delicately, retorted Perry bitterly. Sorry, Doctor. Please just go out there and do whatever you have to do for us to get back to normal again. Whatever it is, please do it quickly. Marcus Vitellius managed to turn his salute into subtle mockery by the exaggerated phrasing of his greeting. All hail Ptolemy Caesar, consul Rome, and triumvir of the Dominion. I bring you greetings from the brother Alexander Halius and Tales Ptolemy, triumvir of the Dominion, praetor supreme, and dictator of Rome. One small stool was set ready before Ptolemy's study desk for his visitor's use. Pride Vitellius has been a welcome guest that should by tradition have been offered to him. Vitellius appeared not to notice the slight, however, and seated himself on the stool as though it was the throne. He was dressed in a Praetorian Guard prefect's uniform today. Then in turn was a slight to Ptolemy, showing that Vitellius knew his past military ventures and their consequences. There was no love lost between the 2 men. So you must, Vitellius, then be gone. There must be little purpose in this meeting, as surely as both you and Alexander know fully well. I will never give my approval to further work on Ultimus. Oh, has Alexander changed his mind then? For I have not. Vitellius opened his leather tube, hung in his belt, and drew a scroll which he presented to Ptolemy. The dictator, after much thought, is in a new form. It is intended that this provision be put to the Senate to clarify the dictator's options in a time of extreme emergency. Your support would be very welcome, perhaps advisable. He ignored the implied threat. He read the document carefully, then looked at Vitellius carefully. The wording of this resolution is so vague and general as to give example to Ultimus in almost any circumstance. What form of emergency are you contemplating? It does not give any example, and here it goes: to deploy against enemies both domestic and foreign, but does not give any definition of what it means, either inside or outside the Dominion that I can see. The dictator is well aware of its effects and also its value to the security of the Dominion. We will have no need for such a thing. The world is finite, though Alexander cannot seem to appreciate that fact. Take it back to Alexander. Tell him I will not give my endorsement to this insane proposition. That is your word, Consul? It is. So it be then. So be it then. Farewell. 5,000 feet above the Mediterranean, the royal flagship Taurus pursued its steady droning course for Rome. From the windows of the royal stateroom, the distant purple smuds that was Crete showed clearly. It was a view that Captain Mazentius found his eyes reportedly drawn to. So, Cleopatra confirmed mildly, you can find no trace of Captain Fabio? No, Majesty, and I have had the search from stern to stern. I'm sure you have been most diligent, Captain, but then what can be the answer to this riddle? That is why I thought it best to report to you at once, Majesty, before sending any message back to Alexander while we are still in range. There's no point in spreading news of such a tragedy if there has been without attempting to discover. I think I did notice his manner was a little strange. That is not possible that he suddenly taken sick to open a window for relief, but being unusual to flight. All the compartment windows were designed at this very occurrence. Yes, Majesty, that is most probably what happened. So I transmit this information to you, Alexander? No, not just yet. No, Majesty, just tell me what you wish done. Maxentius left for his own cabin, his mind dizzy with plans and black thoughts of what failure might be. In the corner of the room, a massive figure clad simply in a belted tunic stirred for the first time. He had been standing impassive motionless for the last hour. Gandalf was simply 320 pounds of supremely capable killing machine with an almost dog-like affection for and loyalty to his mistress and owner. It's a fierce, that's a wonderfully effective way of encouraging people to do their best in your service. Cleopatra mused rhetorically. Except for you, faithful Gandalf, you serve because you enjoy what you do and you're very good at it. Exactly what I like to see people using their talents to the full. And just 2 days, Gandalf, it will be your turn to exercise your special skills again. Perhaps it will be the most important service you'll ever render. And as she spoke, her eyes shifted automatically to the outer corner of the stateroom, but occasionally, just for a moment or two, the glass seemed to shimmer and ripple away that had nothing to do with the vibration of the vessel. Then it settled and showed true once more. Perry sat elbows on the council, chin jumped in hands, and watched the people flow past on the monitor screen. The point of view of the unseen camera was about chest high. Occasionally, people would appear to be looking directly at her, which meant they had been glancing at the medallion the doctor was wearing and the chain around his neck. It was also contained a tiny microphone which transmitted the hub of conversation that filled the forum Romanian through which the doctor was currently making his way. Here I am, stopped in the middle of ancient Rome, at least a version of ancient Rome, having come with the object of Roman soldiers and the actual daily people at the time. The best I can do now is watch them on television, courtesy of the doctor's own hidden eye channel. So, okay, it's great the doctor's out about the morphic resonator concealed his wristband seems work, but let's face it, it's simply boring crap to have been here, like the bird woman of Alcatraz. Irritably, she scratched the pats of feathers on her arm. Miniature audiovisual equipment had been another item the doctor had just sooner recalled he had tucked away somewhere just before he left an hour earlier. The doctor descended through the temple roof skylight and down a gallery level below hanging from it, which Perry thought was an inadequately slender cord in the process. Neither his build, which was not designed for acrobatics, nor his contemporary costume of sandals, long tunic, and cloak, which got tangled as lines, seemed help matters. But he had finally made it safely and equally importantly unobserved. Fortunately, the upper levels of the temple seemed to be practically deserted at that hour, which was by then sometime after midday. Perry had been treated to a rapid sequence of images showing stairs, marble columns, large statue of Cleopatra dominating the end of a lofty chamber, entrance hall, and the sun streaming in through large doors. Briskly, the doctor descended the broad flight of steps down to the plaza that opened before the temple tombs. He turned around to examine the appropriate place of concealment from the outside for the first time. Perry appreciated the visual impact of a line of towering columns that frowned front of the building and how the eye automatically followed them up past the blocks of the massive decorated entablature. When it came to architecture, they knew how to make a statement, which in this case was this building is dedicated to somebody who is really somebody whose importance you will be reminded of every time you pass it by. The doctor's first objective had been a practical but mundane visit to a money changer. By dint of going through the pockets in the TARDIS's huge wardrobe room, he assembled a collection of old coins predating the present time but hopefully exchangeable for local currency. 20 minutes after leaving the tomb with Perry and his electronic attendants, he had made his way to one of the city's market streets. To her eyes, the shops were singularly unimpressive. Hardly more than holes in the wall with stars open wide to display their wares, signs bearing symbols of the respective trades projected to over the potted awnings to say the shop fronts. Perry had subconsciously been expecting the 10 BC equivalent of armored glass, or at least a lot of heavy bars, but the tiny bearded man with the scales assessed the doctor's mixed offerings seemed to work entirely out of one massive iron-bound chest. After some suggestion, the doctor batted his assorted coins, no doubt at a very uncomfortable exchange rate for a modest sum of local money. Where are you going now? Perry inquired of the convict. The Central Forum, the doctor replied, his words sounding slightly slurred. The throat mic allowed him to talk back by sub-vocalizing without speaking aloud, but it took some practice. To an onlooker, it might appear that he was mumbling to himself. It's the heart of the city's social and public life. Apart from learning the potential power resources, there might be some useful information about what has been going on here to be overheard. He came across something usefully informative at the next street corner. Assuming the sculptor had done them justice, the three were all handsome people. Two were men, one was a woman. Man Barmer at the corner, as Perry looked at them, was a little older than the other two with distinctive high forehead, but they all seemed to have similar features, though they were all related. They are inscriptions carved in the alcove wall. There was also Perry There was also Perry couldn't help but notice some graffiti adorning the official text. These appear, said the doctor, to be the triumvirate, country ruling the Roman dominion, and are all Cleopatra's children. Lord man on the right is the Ptolemy Caesar, her child by Julius Caesar, while the other two were fathered by Mark Antony, Cleopatra, Selene, and Alexander Helius. Alexander, according to the inscription, is dictator of Rome. You mean its title, right? Yes, Julius Caesar was made a dictator for life in 44 BC. It's all about the highest office the Republic could bestow. Usually the post was only granted for short periods in emergency, but there was the temptation to have the term extended. Ambition and power exact their price, as always. What's the graffiti say? Well, it's not very complimentary to Alexander about certain taxes or apparently for entertaining ambition to be emperor. Selene is castigated simply for being Queen of Egypt. Old resentments die hard. Seems never mind. This is a start. I shall press on to the forward to see what else I can discover. The forum was an open place flanked by temples and public buildings. Some were sitting playing little games on boards, the details of which Perry could not make out. Others were involved in debates, some quite heated, which were gathering their small crowds of interested bystanders. In one corner, an open-air craft court was apparently being held, a proper seat for the magistrate, and a vacant steps into the spectators. The doctor hesitated as he passed out and trying to hear the advocates' cases. Come on, doctor, we don't need a lesson in Roman law right now. Reluctantly, he moved on, passing the script he came to, listening for anything that might prove useful. It's more or less at this point that Perry had become bored and frustrated and turned down the volume. After some thoughts, he turned the volume up again. Look, doctor, this is fine in theory, but if nobody's conveniently going to lecture on the history of the last quarter century for the benefit of displaced time powers, then it's not going to get us a whole lot of good. If there's somewhere else you can, like the library or something. Fortunately, a Roman library isn't likely to be up to date on the most recent events in any usefully objective form. In any case, I don't know exactly what questions to ask, and I would rather not call attention to myself by revealing any suspicious ignorance of common knowledge. Research is likely to take some time. Well, where else can you go to pump people for the straight gossip without them becoming suspicious? There was a silence at the other end, broken suddenly by a loud exclamation which surprised those people standing there docking the form. Of course! In veritas. What do you mean? But the doctor was already asking directions to the nearest tabernae. Very shortly, the image on the marble was bobbing forward at a brisk walking pace. As this made up confused Perry took the army to get up and stretch her legs. For a few minutes, he carefully examined the patches of the feathers on the body and for any indication they had spread further. They still covered the fleshier parts of her arms and legs, with thicker growth above her ankles and calves. The diamond-shaped patch on her chest ran halfway to her navel. They remarked her thicker ruffs of feathers between her shoulder blades. Incipient wings, she certainly couldn't recall feeling them on Varus, though of course she hadn't exactly been taking notes at the time. Still, it did suggest the patch was not simply repeating itself. Perhaps with the whole process occurring at a slower pace and not forced, it was more controlled. At least everything seemed stable for the moment. In fact, the feathers were not actually uncomfortable, she decided, feeling more like very soft wool and were presently warm. She looked at the sharp talons her nails had formed into, and I've seen longer than these, she told herself. Pleased with her positive attitude, he walked to the exterior doors and peered out in the darkness, taking a breath of fresh air. Froze, listening intently. Tabernae had the sign of a brown bear. It certainly had atmosphere, could see the doctor. An amalgam of stale beer, lamp, oil, and sweat. The decor lacked the charm normally associated with, for instance, the ideal pub. The floor was carpeted with a mixture of rushes and sawdust that seemed in urgency need of changing. The bar loomed out of the gloomy exterior was a simple, rough dawn saw, polished black by use, backed by an unstable-looking rack of cells carrying assorted jars. He brought in an unopened tunics of wine, with the equivalent of slightly less than a liter, and selected the cleanest cup he could see. But the doctor was looking for somebody sitting alone, preferably one who had reached the stage of needing to drink company, even if there was nobody actually with them. Yes, so in the center of the room, a small man in late middle age. His clothes were somewhat dark-stained, but they lacked of fair quality. His general appearance was that of a thinker rather than a manual worker. Dr. Cassidy walked over to him. Excuse me, good sir, but I'm a stranger in town, and I have to drink alone. May I offer you some wine? The man looked up from his cup and tried to follow the doctor. What's say? Oh, I said that I would like to join you in a drink. Yes. Sit down, please, yourself. What does it matter anyway? It's only cuppy only half filled. Good health to you. I am the doctor of TARDIS. Might I inquire as to whom I have the pleasure of drinking with? TARDIS, is that in Greece? Exceptionally small island to the seaweeds, you would not have heard it, but I have heard that you are from that fine land. I am Themos of Perseus, philosopher of natural phenomena. Master Themos, I think you are just the person I've been hoping to meet. Perry was kneeling on the ground just outside the TARDIS. She had first heard the sound. She had visions of the mummy of Cleopatra working towards her out of the darkness. Unmistakably, it was the sound of digging. From this observation, the image of tomb robbers came very naturally to mind. She got to her feet. All right, if it is tomb robbers, where are they going to come with until long? Where are they going to come up? How long until they appear? And how do I break it to the doctor? So how do you see the passage of history being affected by the progress of invention, Master Themos? The doctor ventured with studied carelessness. Say, for instance, over the last quarter century, there have been so many changes by way of material discoveries that have influenced society, have there not? Thermos was nodding admittedly, if unsteadily. The doctor suspected he welcomed a pain to talk to. Nothing like it in all recorded history. But what would you say was the major underlying cause of the change? Why, the Oracle of Alexandria. What else? Of course, the Oracle, said the doctor, quickly trying to smile. He knew what he was talking about. By what I mean was the underlying factors beneath the obvious. I mean the matter in which new concepts were applied. The human factor and their utilization. The element of change, destiny. Trailed off lamely. This appeared to make sense to Themos, who made a wise pyramid of his fingertips after a few preliminary failures at making them meet. Naturally, timing of the discovery of the Oracle off the coast of Alexandria was crucial. Truly was said the Serapis smiled on the Queen of the East and her consort in that hour. Imagine how the subsequent course of events would have run had this not occurred. Where would we be today? Oh, where indeed? Doctor, I think something's happening here. Dr. Hasty raised his cup to cover his lips and mouth. Don't bother me now. Well, we like that then. And there was a click as she turned off. Perhaps by now, the revelation of the secrets of the steam-driven engines and the destructive force of the blasting powder, they were so decisive that Actium seemed quite commonplace by Ray Kroll at the time. Back in the TARDIS, Perry was wondering if she hadn't been a little sharp with the doctor. After all, he had obviously found someone useful to talk to. Perhaps it was just well she hadn't told him. She tried to race back there against Cluck. He might have been getting to the temple roof. Anyway, calling for the doctor's help as soon as there had been a problem had always become a habit. Surely she could think of something herself. She must be able to outwit a bunch of ancient Roman tomb robbers. Yes, she was sure she could come with something. Well, it meant going outside the TARDIS for a while. Hadn't she said she could cope with a few more feathers? This wasn't like before on Varys when she was panicked and confused. This time she was in control. Leaving the recorder running so they could review whatever the doctor discovered later, she picked up a torch and strode purposefully onto the antechamber. She worked her way around the chambers, listening intently, then started up the stairs for the treasure vault. Well, she thought, right on target, and they couldn't have more than a few feet to go. They would have a nice surprise when they lifted that slab. She would see it so that they had the surprise of their lives. And after the consolidation of the Dominion, there came expansion of the northern lands. Africa and Persia, the Potomac, crossed to the east. Anyway, the Dominion enjoyed many years of stability under Cleopatra and Marcus Antonius, and there was a general increase in prosperity and well-being without any thinking man can oddly applaud. And I know many have claimed a proving an essential positive value of the Oracle devices. I ask you, how can a man observe the stars at work night with all the white hazing in the sky and the electrical factory on the plain, belching smoke and covering the place with black stuff? I have complained, but does anybody listen? Doctor filed away the information about the generating station for future reference, then tried to steer Themos away from what was clear his head hate. But what is your opinion on current events now that Antonius and Cleopatra have gone? Well, of course, their children are the only possible heirs, and fine people they are too. But it must be that there have been tensions. A triumvirate by its very nature was not a stable entity. History teaches us that. And now, yes? Tell me what you think of things now. He pulled his dust mask and started blowing him. Decimus froze in the act of passing another prop material. Is it the floor? Think it is. Get Cass up here. Tell him we've made it. The division of the dominion into east and west is really a product of different historic histories, populates, but the crimes or devices have served to exasperate matters. Another device the Egyptians have for making the power directly from sunlight, and the airship engines are not steam powered, oh no, but driven by a type of flammable oil. There was one source of unease between our own dictator and his sister right away, and then, of course, there was the business of that mother's remains. Of course, you do tell me what you thought of that. I remember my dad doing walls years ago. Good solid work that was. What, those blocks of insulin by the river? They had to be shored up last year. That wasn't his fault. That was subsidence. Adds that. Stop talking and fetch the jack. We've got a treasure vault to open. So it's largely due to Ptolemy Caesar's mediation that the dispute was settled. He pointed out that just because she died while in Rome, her proper resting place was in Alexandria. Still had taken 2-3 years to resolve the matter, and remains have already been interred in her tomb on the Viminal. Have you seen her tomb yet? Just in passing, said the doctor. So what was finally decided? Well, Cleopatra Selene is coming to collect her mother's remains. Wednesday? Oh, yes. She arrives tomorrow. There will be special games and various celebrations. The usual entertainment, so please the masses. Then she'll take them back to Alexandria. Doctor had suddenly tensed. You mean they'll be opening the tomb? What? No. The casket has already been removed. It's lying statement of the Temple of Serapis. I think it is. Oh, yes. The tomb's all sealed up again now. What's that cast? Came a voice from below. Nothing. We're here, aren't we? Right, Pine. Where else do you think that we'd be? One by one, the robbers emerged from the shaft and looked about themselves in stunned silence. Horror, ain't it beautiful, said Strabo in hushed tones. This seemed to break the spell. Beautiful, my heart. This is money, lad, and don't you forget it. Don't go soft and sentimental on us now. Because there was a notable sense of awe in this sports. Hesitantly, as though they were afraid it was all a mirage, they might fade away any moment. All but Strabo, whose lumpy features were creased by a worried frown. Cass, you sure it's safe? I mean, she's not still in there, is she? Told you already, they took her away a month ago to be shipped off to Egypt. Nobody's here now except now this who disturbs the sleep of Cleopatra. Voice was female and eerie, sepulchral. It echoed around the chamber. White veil fell away, and the feature of a woman appeared to rise to her feet. She wore the headdress, gown, and jewelry of an Egyptian queen. Her eyes and mouth glowed a ghostly green, and the patch of her skin seemed peacefully motionless. Later, Decimus, who was the unwilling last member of the frantic group, swore they had heard terrible laughter flowing down the shaft after them. Naturally, he didn't recognize that it had an American accent. Back in the treasure chamber, Perry peeled the strips of globe off her face, grinning in satisfaction. Carefully, she pulled one of the larger wedges free for the slab and used it to knock the others in the jacket away. She dragged a low table out of the pile of funeral goods and set it over the slabs, then stacked several smaller pieces of furniture and assorted ornaments on top. If they came back again this way, she would know it. Returning to the center of the chamber, she pulled the seats off the throne chair. She removed Cleopatra's headdress and carefully carried it over to the ornate chest where she had found it and the rest of the costume. The Queen of the Nile had certainly gone well prepared for the afterlife. Hope you didn't mind me borrowing these, but it was in a good cause. She picked up her torch and went over to the door beyond what the doctor had said lay Cleopatra's actual mummy casket and examined the rope shield tied across the handle. She pictured the smaller type of shield they had cut away from the antechamber. Quickly, she pulled off the rest of her disguise and returned to her chest. She hurried back to the TARDIS to see if she could interrupt Dr. Long to tell him about it and have something to eat, she added. Suddenly, she was feeling famished. Should have saved your well list of good health for yourself, Doctor. Oh, why is that? Because the world is coming to an end, he said blankly. Alexander Helios was just emerging from the collidium of the baths of Antonius in a billow of stream and swathed in towels when Vitellius followed him. A group of Alexander's usual followers were also in attendance. He gestured for Vitellius to join them as they strode across the marble of the lofty central hall through an archway and onto the open-air Frigadone. Alexander emerged and was wrapped in a fresh robe by an attendant. So, Vitellius, how did dear Caesarion respond to your my proposal. Not now, I would have wished, Dictator. He absolutely refused to give his support under any conditions. His manner was, if I may observe, most insulting to me personally, which I could bear, but what he implied about your noble self, he trailed off, looking like a man whose sensibilities would only be further offended if he was asked to relate any details. Alexander's handsome features darkened and his eyes narrowed. I see, this is not good for Vitalis. You led me to accept my new proposals. I regret I was wrong, Dictator. Perhaps I let my desire for an amicable conclusion cloud my judgment. For a moment, Alexander regarded him intently and was uncertain the way his mood would take him. Then he gave a brief, good-humored chuckle. That's what I like about you, Vitalis. There is no pretense. When you make a mistake, you admit it and accept the responsibility. And when you have something hard to tell me, you do not start the task. In my position, all I seem to meet me are those who tell me what they think. I want to hear an apparently totally blameless personal lives. You are too kind, Dictator, but I regret there was more to tell. It was only a impression I gained mine, nothing that was actually said. Well, I fear Ptolemy Caesar intends to gather support in the Senate and oppose you openly. Well, that could be a step too far. I have tolerated Caesarion while he confined himself in trivial matters, kept our Jesus agreements private. I'll let him be if he kept his unsettling stories and fullest ideas to himself, but this is too much. All right, Vitalis, if it must be done, then it must be today, as we discussed. I shall put the matter in hand immediately. It will be done within hours. Remember, this will be turned to your advantage. Yes, I know, but I'd hope with Caesarion. But such is life. Is there any news of my sister's progress? As far as I know, she will arrive on time, Dictator. I have received no reports of any incident to cause her delay. Oh, well, it was only a chance that Fabio might find opportunities to what we sent him. We must simply rely on our principal plan, that is all. A pity it would have been so much simpler otherwise. Alexander bowed his head for a moment as though suddenly wary. Why, but those are weighty decisions to bear. It was said that the crown weighs heavy on the head they rule. Crown, I have only worn a royal crown. That was not heavy. The man stood behind me and said, remember, you are mortal. There was no true crown. No, Dictator. I did not mean that sort of crown. I meant one such the old kings of Rome wore and those of Egypt. Crown which marks divine power, and it's your destiny to wear. But those people wanted to, Vitalis. You know that. The moment will come, Dictator, soon. Hi, Doctor. What have you got to do now? Perry inquired. Say, this looks like a pretty weird place. The description was not unkind, as Perry could see there were hidden cameras. Demo's workman room closely resembled the den of an eccentric alchemist, and her ceiling hung with many oil lamps. One stack of cells spilled over with both scrolls and fully bound books. On a bench was an impressive array of jars, flasks, and pipes resembling a miniature chemical factory. Besides the tools was pinned a star chart and a world map. As the doctor returned, the camera revealed the long tube of a retracting telescope mounted on a tripod that was sitting on the corner. Sorry, Galileo, you're too late this time, Perry thought. Demos self could be seen scribbling about on a littered central work table as though searching for something. The doctor raised his hand ostensibly to scratch his nose under the cover, which said, "This is the house of Themos of Perseus, and he has brought me back here." So many proof of something rather disturbing if it's true. So who is this guy, Rum's first research scientist? Philosopher of natural phenomena. Weren't you paying attention earlier? Sorry, I just have this tomb robber to deal with. What? Perry, are you all right? Oh, sure. I chased them off, no problem. The thing is, I overheard one say the Cleopatra's coffin had been taken out of the tombs a month ago, but we know the seals were still in place when we arrived. They didn't look like they were only a month old, did they? Strange. Themus told me the very same thing. We may have to look into that later. Meanwhile, I want to see what he has discovered. Is it important? Oh, only the end of the world. Oh? He must have found the papers he had been searching for, and he laid them out for the doctor to examine. You have no idea what relief it is to find an intelligent listener these days. I've tried to alert my fellows to whom I found, but they wouldn't take any notice. This is the price of individualism and pride, I suppose. But at least they walk from the brown bear to clear his throat. He perched himself. Now, with the aid of the new magnifying tube, he waved at the telescope, which he had observed a few months ago. I'd hope to improve on some of these. An attempt. Hypericurious of Nekia, for example. My problems first began when I attempted to duplicate the quite elementary experiment first performed by Erothene of Alexandria. You are aware I trust that the Earth is a spherical body. I am. Good grief. Anyway, I repeated the observations, and compared them with the original results. And they were quite different. Observational error? I was most careful and checked them repeatedly. The inescapable conclusion, according to my figures, is the distance between the Earth and the Sun is diminishing. But surely the apparent size of the Sun would therefore be increasing. Aye, Senior, you know how to sound resonator, Doctor, but self-evidently is not the case. What you deduce from that? That the guy's loopy, suggested Perry in the Doctor's ear. That the Sun itself is becoming smaller. Precisely. Now do you see our peril? Either the Sun will strike until it is extinguished altogether, or will strike the Earth and we will all be burnt to a cinder. There was an awkward silence, but before the Doctor could respond, Themos continued, I have proof that some effects of this change are already making themselves felt. Would you care to examine the contents of the jars on the lower half over there? The Doctor went over and inspected them carefully. The camera medallion swung open the jars, giving Perry a very detailed view of their contents. Then she would have wished, what are those? Nightmare shapes of chimerical and distorted creatures. There's a two-headed snake, a rat with large translucent insect wings. These are the best ones I could afford to buy from the traders. Others cannot be, and the dictator has a fine collection, I understand. Oh, there's no doubt those are genuine, asked the Doctor. Where have you been living these past few years, Doctor? Of course they are genuine. The point I was making was, where do you think they all came from? The East? Exactly, at least as far as Eastmen do dare to travel or allowed to travel. And why are these things simply part of travelers' tales for so many years, now to be found in such relative abundance? What do you believe happened in the East? Well, indeed, there have been many stories and much that is still hidden both by circumstance and changing position of the Sun. But I believe it has something to do with the changing position of the Sun. There's a rumor that a darkness has fallen over the East. The effect is certainly clear. Life has departed many lands, and what is left is distorted, as you see. And what has happened there will soon affect us all. Doctor, I'd hope when the end came to be sufficiently drunk not to care, but sufficiently sober to observe the process, which I suspect will be fascinating, but perhaps a little uncomfortable towards its last stages. I've been practicing for the event, but I haven't got it right. Doctor stepped forward and helped the little man into a more comfortable chair in the corner. I thought of asking the Oracle whom the world will end, but I'm not certain I want to know. How can you ask it? Usually, go to the temples. It's in Rome now? Of course, half a year. Half in Alexandria. Well, this put a whole place stand on things, hasn't it? Do you think whatever happened to us has something to do with those freaky creatures and then whatever has happened out east? Almost certainly. And is that all? Can't you be a tad more specific? I have an idea, but I don't want to talk about it just yet. Does that mean I'm not going to like it? Perry, I really don't know what you think. Just try to be patient, please. Okay, so what are you going to do now? Let Themos sleep it off, then persuade him to take me to see this oracle. What's your sense? The place has got all the answers. Meanwhile, you're going to explain about these tomb robbers. Perry gave a condensed account of her deception which amused him and the Doctor in his dry way. But one point did bother him. Perry, how long were you outside the TARDIS to arrange all this? As the transformation proceeded further, like I said, I can handle a few more feathers. I'm okay. Is that all? Well, I've got wings growing, and I'd better be careful not putting my feet up. Like birds have to hold on to branches properly. Oh, Perry. No, it's okay, Rhea. I decided not to let it bother me. I think it's sort of my way symbolically of getting back at them on Varys for what they did and how they made me feel. The memory would not let go away. Doctor, I was so scared when I was under that machine. I lost control and had an accident like a kid. Perry, perhaps I should come back. Hell no, Doctor. Got to stay out there and sort things out like you always do. I'm okay. In fact, I'm getting curious about this change thing. It's quite an experience. I mean, life swapping just doesn't come close. As long as you know you can get back to normal afterwards. I'll get back to normal, won't I? Yes, you will return to normal as soon as we can regain our link with the Eye of Harmony. But don't go carried away with your present state. Remember, it's not natural to you, but partially the product of your subconscious mind. I will, Doctor. Like I said, don't worry about me. I'm feeling fine. Perry watched the monitor, which still showed Thebo's workroom. The Doctor was looking curiously about the clutter of the antique scientific instruments which he waited for their owner to sleep off his liquid lunch. But Perry was thinking about what she had said to the Doctor. She admitted to be one of the more fearful and humiliating moments of her life. Now, how do I feel? She asked herself honestly. Doctor said to be careful. Yeah, but I really do feel good. This time I'm in control. If I want to, I can do it. She ran ahead, throbbing her ear, yet there was a few long feathers growing out of her scalp now. She suddenly giggled. What was the right combination of shampoo and conditioner for them? Then she decided. She walked over to the door and stepped outside. The lowering afternoon sun was tinting the front of the Oracle, Temple of the Oracle, cream and gold. By the time the Doctor and Themos joined the tail of the queue, shuffling into the buildings. Now that looks really Egyptian, Perry commented over the tomb lake. Mere effect. The resurrection of dated styles no doubt remind the Romans of the origin of the Oracle. Fine distinction I will not quibble over, replied the Doctor. It's far cheaper than the purchase of a token to ask the Oracle a direct question, though I'm afraid the Doctor that we shall soon be followed very close to the Oracle itself. Themos was right. After traversing a hall ranked with yet more columns, those people in the queue with tickets were separated from the rest into their own smaller file. They all passed between heavily studied and ornamented double doors and entered the sanctuary chamber containing the Oracle. Can you see anything, Doctor? Because I sure can't. Several pans bearing smoldering incense were dotted about the inner chamber, filling the air with a haze of blue smoke. What had to be the Oracle itself was further screened by long, gauzy curtains hanging in graceful folds from the ceilings. The priest then passed through the curtains and appeared to rest his hands on what might have been a stable and bow his head. He spoke to him quietly for some moments, the man's face expressing surprise and puzzlement. At length he bowed to the priest and left the chamber. The Doctor and Themos continued through the perimeter, but failed to get any clearer view of the Oracle. You must pay for a ticket to get any closer, said Themos, or else join the classes of the new mechanical artisans whose work have been so greatly influenced by its revelations. That is all. Meanwhile, we must leave, I'm afraid. The remaining onlookers were being ushered out of the chamber, back down the hallway, carrying the scowling and frustrated Doctor with them. I must see the Oracle now. Guards closed and tried to restore order for a moment. All eyes were quick turned to Watson. Then Themos heard the Doctor whisper quietly, "Sir, see you tomorrow. Don't look around." And he was gone. When the TARDIS wandered, Perry watched columns gust right. Then a small stout door opened, revealing a long, dimly lit passage. Doctor, you sure this is a good idea? Past that several doors leading off it. The Doctor moved down the light, pausing to listen at each one until he reached almost the last one, which he opened carefully. There was a second door, locked by heavy bolts, opposite to the one the Doctor had entered by. Silently, the Doctor crossed over to it and he pressed his ear to the woodwork. He realized there was a small sliding panel at eye level. Gently, he eased it back a couple of inches and he peered out. After a moment, apparently satisfied with what he saw, he slid it closed and sat down composedly on the bench. "I hope you know what you're doing," came Perry's aggrieved tones in his earpiece. "I have to get a closer look at this Oracle, somehow preferably without priests as intermediaries. This room is one of a row that's open onto the Oracle chamber. I noticed these doors earlier. They're probably for the rest of special petitioners to the Oracle. All I have to do is stay here until it's quiet tonight, then take a look at the Oracle undisturbed. You hope?" "Actually, I thought I'd take advantage of the opportunity chance provided rather well." "And had you proposed to get out again?" "If necessary, I'll simply wait until the public come in again tomorrow and slip out with them." Doctor, it's never that easy. "What's worth the risk to find out what the Oracle is?" "First, I thought Theme was talking about some mystic figure in a trance with some sort of Oracle of Apollo Delphi, but there's created some sort of artifact installed here that the priests consult. If this is the source of the information on advanced technology these people are getting, then I must take a closer look at it. And then, it will depend on what I find behind the curtains. Have it your own way, Doctor, but please take care, otherwise I'll have to come and rescue you. In your present unstable condition, that would be very unwise." "Never know, Doctor." For nearly an hour after the public left, the Doctor heard only the sounds of the priests and attendants clearing after them. For a while, there was only the distant, intermittent tramp of guards' boots. Then came the sound of a group of people approaching. The doors of the chambers were opened again, and the group of artisan Themos had told him about entered. He observed them cautiously through the panel. They seemed less in awe of the Oracle than the general public had been. But he still could not make any further details about whatever it was behind the curtains. He strained to hear what the artisans, engineers, and proto-scientists were saying, but they seemed to huddle in small groups amongst themselves. The Doctor recognized the sounds of interdisciplinary rivalry, which left him no better informed than before. The group stayed for nearly 2 hours. Finally, then came the sound of departing feet. The lights in the chambers were extinguished, and the heavy doors closed. The doctor beamed with self-satisfaction in the darkness as he heard the lock turn. A few moments later, he heard the door at the end of the corridor also being locked. Still, he waited another 10 minutes to be sure, then prepared to move. He fished out a pencil torch from his belt pouch and called Perry to order. She didn't answer the first time, and it took 3 more calls before her voice sounded in his ear. She sounded breathless, and so clearly bursting with excitement over something that the doctor asked, curiously, not a little anxiously, "Perry, are you all right?" "Fine, doctor, just great, really wonderful, fantastic." She was gushing with elation, her words trembling over themselves. "Calm down, for goodness sake. Now tell me what's happened." "Doctor, I can fly." Just half an hour before, Perry stood in front of her mirror and would know the change was complete. It wasn't what she saw, she decided, it was more how she felt inside. Her senses were tingling, and she felt more alert, more aware of herself than she could recall. She felt vigorous, wired in, very capable, and tremendously powerful. It was those who was a new potential within her that was just waiting to be fulfilled. Most of her body was covered with fine, dark features now, except for her face, the palms of her hands and soles of her feet. This seemed entirely right and proper. Her hair had become a fine crest of feathers, nearly growing back from a sharp peak on her forehead to trail down between her shoulders. The toes also seemed longer and more flexible, though not disproportionately so. I sure could get a good grip on something now, she thought. She was wondering if she could grow a tail, and suspecting it might make sitting down a problem. But her most striking feature was her wings. They were elegantly shaped, like the best angel wings as are properly portrayed on films, except in a darker tint. She felt the deliciously play of unsuspected muscles across her shoulders and back as they smoothly unfolded and extended. Fully spread, they spanned a good 16 feet, she estimated. She reached out and pressed the leading edge of one wing, amazed by the sensation of touching a part of her that had not existed a few hours before. But it all seemed perfectly normal at the same time. And she knew somehow a fold of her brain must have opened up or developed to manage these new additions. Perry stroked the finely graded and ordered feathers, realizing she must read up on all the proper names for them. She did remember that the long feathers around these tips were called primaries, and the shorter, broader ones were the secondaries. And that about grooming, she suddenly wondered, birds do it all the time, but did they use their beaks? Will a hairbrush do instead? She dissolved in a helpless fit of giggles. This was all so weird, practically macabre, and yet it was simply the way things were. Varus won, Perry won at last. Experimentally, she beat her wings and felt the exciting flow of air across the surfaces, a sensation that would have been quite meaningless a short time ago. It was a pity she was too big to actually fly, but aerodynamically she knew it would not work. However, pleasingly shaped her wings were. She beat them a little harder and was surprised at the surge of powers they seemed to give. She definitely felt the lift. She went through the control room and checked that it was all too quiet at the doctor's end and stepped out in the antechamber and was surprised to find how brightly lit it seemed. She paused thoughtfully. Of course, her eyes adjusted to the generally low levels of improvised lighting. What have I got? She wondered. Owl's eyes, for that matter? All her senses did come to be sharp, and maybe it would come in handy. Okay, Varus won, Perry 2. Hesitantly, with her wings extended, she tried a little jump off her lower steps of the stairway. She repeated the experiment several times, gaining confidence, a sense of balance. I can probably do better than this, she thought, but I'll need more space. She checked on the doctor again, then ran eagerly up the stairs, feeling strangely exhilarated and light-footed. Perry stepped towards it on her toes, her mind focused simply on reaching its top. Her wings beating in anticipation. Unconsciously, she reached out towards it. Her wings beat harder. She felt her feet leave the ground. There was a moment of dizziness, minged with stark disbelief that she was flying. She rose up in the air unsteadily, almost lazily, beating wings, acutely aware of the powerful surges of air they generated, aware of the delicate flutterings of her leg winglets that seemed to be keeping her in balance, aware of the jumble of the treasure chamber below her, now visible from an unexpected angle, and of the arching vault just above her wingtips. Most of all, she was aware that flying was totally impossible. This was probably she reflected not a wise thought to have then, when manifestly she was doing that very same thing. On the other hand, she thought reality might just prove to be out there to be a very long lunch. Why not let it go? Final score, Varus 1, Perry 10. Then she thought of the doctor, and the thought seemed quite witty to bring her down to earth. She landed gently, her wings folding neatly and smoothly across her back. Then she had to tell him about. She ran down the stairs towards the TARDIS. She heard her voice calling as she slipped in through the doorway. Oh, Perry, what have you done? But, Doctor, I feel wonderful. Really great. I mean, I tried parascending once, but there's no comparison. To actually fly yourself, you can't describe it. You have to be there, you know? I know, that's the problem. That's not a natural ability for your proper body form. Well, why shouldn't I join it, Webcam? Because you might get to like it too fast. There may be complications afterward. But you still think I'll get back to normal when everything's sorted out, don't you? Physically, there's every reason to suppose you will. This is not the same as Veros, but that is only half the problem. Oh well, it's too late now. We'll just have to cross the bridge when the time comes. But I still want to know how I can fly. I know it shouldn't be possible. Well, it's possible you are being aided psychokinetically. You mean levitation and all that? But I've never been able to do anything like that. Normally not, but there's clearly a different matter. Remember, there's still that trace energy field I detected to be accounted for. You may subconsciously be tapping into that for power. The effect operates unconsciously as you flap your wings, making it appear they are solely responsible. Still, could probably not be a good idea to fly without them. Whatever the method, I may wish you hadn't begun this. I've got this message now, thank you, Doctor, but you know this does make it as though there's something odd about this place. I mean, odder than your average parallel universe, of course. That has already become apparent, which is all the more reason why I must take a closer look at the Oracle. It may hold valuable clues. I think it's quiet enough now. The Doctor turned on his pencil torch and carefully slid back the door bolts. It was only last closed. Evidently, those responsible for the Oracle thought the outer doors and guards sufficiently security. It was only like that anybody would dare attempt to steal such a revered and antique item. He opened the gate and padded across the inner sanctuary to the curtains that veiled the Oracle. Doctor drew a fold of material aside and shone his torch on the Oracle. I don't believe it, exclaimed Perry, seeing the image that flashed up the Oracle. The Oracle of Alexandria was an exact replica of the TARDIS console unit. And her arm, said Decimus, once again in disbelieving tune. What is it? Was it mold? The cavium, as colloquially known, made the tabernacle of the Brown Bear look almost palatial, but then anything known as the whole is likely to do that. It was always open, you could pay, and were not choosy about quality. You could drink until you were sick or insensible or both. But then the whole was not particularly about its customers either, as long as they had nothing to do with the authorities. In fact, a Sorceress gang actually raised the tone of the place with every drink they downed. And they had been doing so steady for hour after hour. Behind the trestle and plank table in the corner that served as a counter, Pallas shook his head sadly. Whatever had socked them, the drink was hardly touching it, though they were doing their best to put that right. And whatever it was, they'd made it clear they didn't want to talk about it except amongst themselves in nervous, anguished whispers. This was perfectly all right with Pallas, who understood that many of his clientele had their little secrets, and he made sure he was seen to scrumptiously respect their privacy, while unobtrusively keeping his ears open for any useful piece of information. He might quite inadvertently overhear. In fact, he had overheard a few words of who Cassandra's gang were muttering to each other, and he decided that this time he didn't want to hear anymore. Back at the table, Straubel's huge head was pillowed in his arms, which were folded across the drink-stained wood before him. It were the evil eye, Cass. She saw it with me, and I'm gonna die. Cassandra reached out and patted his head vaguely. It's all right, lad. You're not going to die. We're not going to let any heathen Egyptian's clean spirit get in the way of what... Are we? They looked at the drink. No, we're not. Think it over careful like that. We'll see. We're not going to let all that lovely gold and jewels and stuff go to waste sitting around a tomb, are we? The others looked as though they were prepared to do so. Just as once. No, we're not. We worked for that load of valuables. It's ours. It's our console, the doctor said firmly. Doctor, said Perry equally firmly over the comm link. I'm sitting our console can't be. Doctor played his last torch over the Oracle of Alexandria again. Then how is it that it has every modification, every customized detail that I built into it, and it even has that scratch where you dropped your coffee cup? It's not even Type 40 console unit. It's quite definitely ours. You mean it's an exact copy? Any copy exact as that might as well be considered identical. That's just hair splitting, but it's significant hair splitting and might explain a lot. Well, when was the copy made? When we were caught up in that energy flux tube. And I rather suspect this is not the only thing that's been copied. But how has it remained functioning all this time? To turn up power, packs were obviously not drained like ours were. All that's working is the general memory bank and the telepathic induction circuits, unfortunately on a reciprocal feedback setting. That can explain its success as a front of all wisdom. Perry thought of the unaccounted gigabytes of information stored in the memory units, all accessible by direct mental link to whatever was close enough and intelligent enough to understand it. Perhaps most of all, that meant nothing to them, but what they had understood and made use of it, and hell. The doctor was working the controls, and Perry saw information flash across one of its plates faster than she could read it. Trying to find out what it has telling them recently about power generation. It may prove useful to all that's most unfortunate, but they found out about the Turgellan method. Is that bad? It's a means of separating isotopes of elements that are otherwise chemically identical, whatever the cumbersome gaseous diffusion process is. So they're going into advanced chemistry? What's the problem? The problem is they're applying it to uranium to an active proportion of isotope 235. You mean they're trying to build an atomic power plant? No, I mean for the past 2 years, according to the records, the Romans have been learning how to build an atomic bomb. Perry was shocked into silence. Continued, matter of fact, interestingly, the Alexandrians do not seem to have realized what the Romans are doing, as they haven't pursued the path of an inquiry. They seem to be more interested in aeronautics. But it's not possible, surely. I'm afraid it is. Simple atomic weapons would be well within their capabilities with the help of the Council has been giving them. Of course, they've been rather crude devices with a low explosive yield, only a few thousand kilotons. That's a horrible thought. Fortunately, horrible or not, it has happened. The question is, how far have they got? Inconvenient and pitless electronic light flooded the chamber, illuminated the doctor mid-stride as he sprinted for the gate and the light just worked green wall. On the jerking monitor screen, Perry got impressed with a shell group standing in the doorway. Handsome and superior man in fine robes while standing beside him was an officer wearing the platoon plumed helmet and breastplate of the Praetorian Guard, with a knot of over his back. The doctor skidded to a halt as he realized they were blocking his escape and looked about him desperately for some alternative. Perry heard two voices cry, "Spy! An assassin!" And a shot rang out. The bullet ricocheted off a column and went back across the chamber like an angry, making everybody duck. "No firing!" shocked the raw man in a commanding voice. "Don't risk the oracle." The doctor took cover behind the console like a rabbit seeking his bureau. "Sword only! Take him alive if you can! Please stand back, dictator. He may be around." "Can't we talk about this?" The doctor called out hopelessly from behind the curtains, but there was no time for talking. Soldiers keen to impress their superiors rushed forward, swords at the ready. Almost by reflex, the doctor picked up one of the silent incense pans and threw it at the leading man, who disappeared in a choking, blinding cloud of dust and ash. The second man cut at the doctor through the curtains, but his sword tangled in the flimsy, clinging material. The doctor sprang forward, tore open the length of curtain, twisted about the surprise guard, then pulled, jerking the man off his feet. The third guard, less ambitious or more cautious than the first two, held back for a moment. The doctor picked up another incense pan and threw the contents of it and swung the pan to connect with the helmet of the second guard. It made a noise like a gong and dropped the man to the floor again. The third guard lunged forward, swinging to sword only, when they would glance off the curved path of the doctor and know how to improvise shield. The dictator began to laugh. Desperately, the doctor switched up a length of tassel cord that had come down with the draperies and flicked the heavy knotted end at the man's eyes, making him flinch back. He flicked it stingingly as his bare shins, then at his face again. The guard cut wildly the cord. His training had not prepared him for fighting with religious soft furnishings. In the TARDIS, Perry watched the madcap fight in a helpless agony of frustration, sick with fear and dreading what seemed its inevitable collusion. She clutched fiercely at the edge of the console, unaware that her talons were gouging its surface. In the temple, the guard officer exclaimed despairingly, "What man is this who fights with no weapons? I really have no choice." "Hold!" the dictator called out. "Guards, leave him be, by my order." The disheveled guards slowly drew him back from the doctor. "Now," continued the dictator in his tones, "you do not like this man's manner of comment, Polonius? Seems undignified, dictator. But surprisingly effective, though, isn't it? Perhaps you could give your guides a few pointers on close combat." Perhaps so, dictator. I find it almost amusing. I find so little to amuse me nowadays." "Yes, dictator." "Of course, we shall have to capture him first. Would you tend to that, Polonius?" The man drew his sword and stepped forward eagerly. "But of course," the dictator continued, halting him in his tracks, "we must make this dignified. We don't want to engage in anything unmanly. Do you, Polonius? And if the fellow has amused me, we'll give him a fair chance. You give the man your sword." With a glance at the superior, the guard edged towards the doctor, who reversed his sword and tossed it to him. The doctor caught off the arrows of Gladys, a short double-edged sword with a heavy pommel no guard. It was quite lethal in the right hand. "Now, Polonius, I've heard of your boast about your prowess sword. Let's see some of it." You know what it's like depending on flattery, and the doctor's somewhat twisted sense of humor, assuming serenity was not an absent. Surrendering was not an option. Unfortunately, he knew Polonius would quite happily kill him. Polonius leaned forward, and the doctor skipped back forward, waving his sword vaguely about to keep it clear. To the doctor, the chamber seemed to blur and grow distant, and sounds become muffled. Within the doctor's mind, a new yet familiar voice seemed to say, "Play a straight bat." Then this puts it, someone said, "Offer him a jelly. Are you sure I can't help?" And then do more over, my dear friend. Let me at him. Gently but firmly, the current doctor's personality pushed aside a new yet also familiar set of reflex superimposed themselves upon his nervous system. Terrible realization dawned that he was suddenly fighting for his life, just to make it worse with every other blow the stranger would utter aloud, ha, for no apparent reason. Somehow it seemed terribly unfair. The clash of sword metal rang louder as Polonius was forced back across the chamber until he was pressed up against the lattice screen of the inner sanctuary. "I suggest," said the stranger with disconcerting manliness, "that you yield, because I'd rather you not deprive the dictator of no doubt a valuable option. Now what do you say to that, Very sensible. Next time, watch your elbow you're holding up." "Splendid." Doctor bowed in polite acknowledgement. The dictator walked around him. "You really are the most audacious rogue I've ever seen. Who are you and who are you from?" "I'm called Doctor, Your Highness." A little premature, but I like the sound of it. Go on." "I'm a philosopher from a small island of Cyclades, just recently arrived in Rome. A philosopher is most capable with a sword, not a skill commonly associated with that calling. I observed that the sharp sword cuts through the most erudite polemic and sometimes best encountered in kind. As keen with your wits as you are with your sword, eh? And why were you skulking around here? I've heard of the wonders of the work, but was unable to afford the cost of a ticket to view it more closely, nor would I obtain the night to consult along with others more favored seekers after knowledge. But your curiosity get the better of you in the end." "Precisely, Your Majesty." "There, flattery again. Yet I know that he's doing, yes, look in his eye. He knows when I know, but he does it anyway. Tell you the finest and slyest rogue in the city. Well, Doctor, what do you expect your clever words to win for you? Pardon, perhaps?" "No, I don't think that would say good. No, people must not lose their respect for the Oracle and what it represents. Otherwise, we'll have footless adventurers streaming here to try their luck. No, I think I shall simply give you a chance. Oh, good. A very small chance, mind you. In fact, you probably won't survive, but I'm sure your death will be amusing. I always aim to give satisfaction. I believe your tongue will still be spouting the day after the rest of you is cold. Now listen, my merry fellow. Tomorrow my sister arrives, bringing Alexander's finest gladiators to challenge all comers in the area. 7 of the best gladiators Rome has to offer are set to oppose him, and you'll like me to be one of them. Just so you'll sell meet Gandos first. Good, top billing. We shall see if he speaks so glibly after your encounter. Take him away, Polonius, and see that he's made comfortable but well guarded. But I ask just one favor." "Well, might the good Polonius here help me prepare for the fight?" "Strange choice. Well, why not? See that he has all that he needs, and all that he has presented ready for the cause in the best possible condition." Guards Perry sagged over the console, filling lip and drained of the tension of the fight. Somehow the doctor had done again. At least he had bought himself a breathing space all through the fight, and the conversation afterwards he had been too frightened of distracting him to communicate. But now, as soon as he was alone, there would be no time to plan. There would be time to plan to escape. With her new abilities, she was sure they could work something out. When she raised her hand to look up the screen, she could see the swinging arms of marching soldiers beyond them, a narrow street lifted by a string of electronic lamps. She could also overhear the doctor talking to Polonius. "Listen, scum, you may have impressed him with your fancy words. You got him in a good mood, and you played him up his fancies, but to me, you're a common thief who improvised by having his tongue cut out, and if any more of you smart talk, you'll do precisely nothing. For the next 2 days, my well-being is your responsibility. If anything happens to me before the fight, the dictator is cheated of his entertainment, who do you think he's going to blame, You made me look a fool. You humiliated me in front of my men and Alexander. Wrong. You simply met a better fighter, and it's no disgrace to lose in your circumstances. Besides, think what you can make of it." There was a pregnant pause. "Then what were you talking about?" "Think what happens if I win against Gandos." "You won't win. He's the best there's ever been. I saw him fight once." "Good. You can give him some pointers to his technique." "I'll say this for you. You got nerve, but I still won't be sorry to see Gandos cut you to pieces." "How considerate of you. Now tell me what this betting is on Gandos." Well, it's all win-win. Few patriotic bets on the best of his opponents. Anybody who bets on me will make quite a tidy sum then. But he won't win. Really? You didn't fare so well against me. Would you see some points my ticket weren't due to you? Well, then we knew Gandalf as well. Now, it's more than a few people know that. There would be no same in having lost the Conqueror of the Mighty, Gandalf, than would there. In fact, you can't see what a close fight you gave me the first time round. By Jupiter's right about the tongue. You won't need sword. You can simply talk Gandalf into cutting in his own throat for you. Acknowledgement is Spartan, I grant you, acknowledged the doctor, looking about us on the Praetorian guardhouse. But I am in no immediate danger. I have adequate plain food and surprisingly good flask of wine. Quite comfortable for the moment. But, doctor, can't leave you there. For the moment, you must. I'm perfectly safe. In fact, I'm probably one of the best protected men in Rome. But you can't be planning to fight this Gandalf character. I hope not, though. I thought I was rather good earlier. I don't know how you managed it, but you can't expect to get lucky that time twice. Luck, that was pure skill, coupled with a moment of quick thinking. Slightly reduced the strength of the morphic field and took advantage of the instability effect to open my mind to the personality of one of my former incarnations who was really good with his sword. He had a strange taste in clothes. Look who's talking. I followed his reflexes temporarily to take over when swordsmanship was called for. I don't care if you can call up the state of Zora or the ghost of Robin to help you. I'm going to try to get you out of there. No, Perry. It's not a matter of cutting a few bars and feeling secluded window. I'm an inner dungeon cell, and the guards have rifles, which they are quite prepared to use. Besides, you have much more immediate and important tests to perform, which will help our situation immeasurably. If you succeed, it must be done under the cover of darkness. Please accept for a moment that I'm quite safe, and that you can better use your new talent. You are sure you can really fly? Told you, Doctor, I'm a natural. You're talking to somebody who already has the rings. Well, please be careful now as you're prepared to act sensibly and not attempt any pointless heroics. Guess if you're sure you'll be okay, I'm all right. This is what you're going to do. First, as a precaution, you better take a dose of the Thal anti-radiation drug from the medicine chest. At least let's take a break. All right. That was the end of part 2 of my read-along. My voice needs a break, but I will do the end theme here by Dalek, credited. So I'm at page 130. Yep, we passed that. 140. Nice.
Huh?
I was the same what page I'm on. All right, guys, that was part 2 of my read-along. I'll do part 3 next week. Take care. If not subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. Bye for now.